I will do Y. And the kid does X, and then the parent, the adult, the teacher goes, oh no, if I don't do Y now, and I don't jack this kid's never going to believe I'm legit. Is it possible, do you think, in the history of the world, that adults have ever laid down the law and said what the punishment would be, only to realize once the law got broken, that was a dumb rule, that was a dumb law, and yet they had to make the tough decision. Do you enforce it, or do you rather say, you know what, that was a really stupid law, I'm going to go ahead and back off on my... Of course, the moment that that happens, what happens in regards to respect to power? You got it. It starts to go away, doesn't it? Now, let me give you a way to maybe make this even more real. I love this story because it actually happened in 303, and so I'll share this story with you. A number of years ago, I was lecturing this very play, ironically enough. I was lecturing this very play, and I was sitting over there on the heater air conditioning unit, and I was talking with my students. My recollection is that they were actually freshmen. And we had a student in our class who was notorious for getting sideways with administration. And he came into the room halfway through my lecture and interrupted my lecture, walked in, screamed some profanity, slammed his books down on the table. He had just come from the principal's office, the vice principal's office, in fact. And, of course, he was doing this to create some kind of, negative energy in 303 and the like. And obviously, students were fascinated to know, what's McGee going to do? So I kind of waited for a little bit for him to calm down, and he looked at me and he goes, what? Like, he's testing me. And I said, oh, no, that's fine. Ironically, I said, we're in the middle of a conversation that you might enjoy. We're talking about the play Antigone. I got no interest in it. I said, well, my guess is that you've been with the administration. I've been with the, and then he called the assistant principal a name or two. And I said, oh, okay, I understand. I said, so basically you got called out for something, right? Am I getting this right? Well, yeah, I got called out. It's totally bogus. I said, well, that's okay. Don't worry about it, because here in a few days, you're going to end up the assistant principal and you'll know what it's like. Woo. The entire room goes, woo. And the student goes, what are you talking about? I said, no. In fact, this could happen as early as today. I mean, think about this. I think I know that on your way home, I think you walk, right? As a freshman, you walk, right? And you walk by a park this afternoon. How about this one? You're walking by that park, and you see a couple of sixth graders wailing away on a second grader. I mean, just beating the tar out of him. This little second grader over at the park. Now, the minute you walk by, you got a choice you have to make, yes? Do you just kind of ignore it? Pretend like you don't see this young kid getting the ever-living snot beat out of him by two sixth graders? Or do you do what I'm going to guess you would do? You're going to walk up to those two sixth graders, you're going to say, knock it off. And he admitted, he goes, yeah, that's probably what I would do. Because sixth graders shouldn't be wailing away on some second grader. It's an act of a coward. He said, it's kind of like that assistant principal picking on me. He has the power, he can get away with it. I said, right. So you walk up to him and you say, knock it off. What do you do when one of the sixth graders looks back at you and says, or what? At that point, I said to my student, and to the rest of my students, at that point, you become the assistant principal. At that point, you become Creon. You walked up to those sixth graders, assuming because of who you were, those sixth graders would go, oh yeah, sorry dude, sorry. But that is not what they did. Instead, what one of them does is says, or what? What are you going to do? And he gets ready to pound. Now you got a choice. You're going to answer force with force? You're going to beat the two sixth graders up? Which, of course, kind of starts to look like, yeah, in reverse bad form. What do? In other words, you made a law, and now you're going to have to decide to enforce that law or not. And it's in that moment, I asked him, I said, do you think it's at all ever possible that an assistant principal in a high school has to enforce a law that he or she does not actually agree with? Do you think that's possible? Just think about it. Do you think it's possible? Of course it's possible. Happens all the time, doesn't it? This is the tension of this play, and this is why I think Greek audiences identified so powerfully with Creon, and I think we can as well. See, we kind of live in our little world sometimes. Think Ismene maybe here. Whereas young people, we don't really often see the other side. This play challenges us to see both sides of this dilemma. Creon has made a rule. He's made a rule, granted, without probably fully thinking it through, granted. But once the law gets broken, Creon has to enforce the law or he looks weak, allowing for other people to say, well, yeah, Creon makes rules, but he doesn't actually mean it. This, of course, made even more challenging because Creon and Antigone are related. They are family. And yes, it's true Creon made a promise to Antigone's daddy Oedipus that he would look after Antigone and Ismene. The dilemma here is palpable. You literally can feel it, especially once you've kind of thought it through. My hope is the next time you actually see this play performed on stage, you can get a sense of the dilemma that is Creon's. And we're really not even to the major dilemma for him, because Creon has a son. Yeah, we'll get to that one. Antigone actually says it to Creon, though. She doesn't back away at all. She says, hey, you know what? A lot of people agree with me. It's just they're afraid. I'm not afraid of you. They are afraid of you. How many times, for example, have you done this, where an adult is having to punish a kid, and every other kid in the room knows this ain't right, but nobody stands up and says anything. Why? Fear. Okay, I don't want to get jacked. Antigone says as much. Another way to say this is tyranny often always uses silence and scare tactics, right? To try and keep everyone in their place. Think again of what we said about the popularity of this play during the Nazi invasion of France and elsewhere as well, right? Antigone will say, finally, that what she did out of love. And she says it this way, and yet, who knows if in the world these things are counted good or evil? Creon says, our foe, I tell thee, ne'er becomes our friend, not even when he dies. In other words, I can never show any kind of compassion to an enemy of the state, right? Antigone says, my bent is fixed, my mind's made up. I tell thee, not for hatred, but for love. She says, it's not that I hate the state. It's not that I want to be somehow a traitor to my country. But I love my brother, and I love the will of the gods, and that's why I did what I had to do. Creon says, go then below, and if thou must have love, love those that thou findest there. While I live, at least, a woman shall not rule. Now it's this line which will begin to make Creon our villain. No question, especially to postmodern audiences. Now, Greek audiences understood a line like this, and they actually could resonate with a line like this because Greek audiences understood the patriarchy that was Greek culture. In other words, Aristotle said it. You have to have that hierarchy where the gods are at the top of the pyramid, right underneath them are men, and beneath them are the women, the slaves, and the beasts of burden. And Aristotle said that is an organic way of seeing the world. Go back to other lectures that I've given on this topic, especially, for example, Gilman's yellow wallpaper comes to mind, okay? For the Greeks, this was an understood paradigm. Everyone in that culture understood men tell women what to do. Women cannot run the state. Absolutely no way. Go back even to the argument at the end of Aeschylus's Aristeia in The Furies, and the ways in which Athena will say, you know, I'm far more man than I am woman at the very end of that play. So here it is. Creon says, I will not let a woman get away with this. It turns into issues of gender and sexism here. And for us then, we will see Creon as, uh-oh, here it comes. But Creon is only mirroring the culture of his day, and in that regards, we've got now another major conflict set up of male versus female. And then in comes Ismene, and the argument is that Ismene helped to do the deed. And in fact, Ismene says, I did the deed, since she will have it so. I share the guilt. I bear an equal blame. Antigone comes back and says, this justice will not suffer, since in truth thou wouldst have none of it, and I for one shared it not with thee. Ismene will ask, or say, I am not ashamed to count myself companion in thy woes. Now, it's an interesting question to ask. Why all of a sudden is Ismene ready to go to the wall with Antigone? One answer is it finally hits Ismene. You know what? If Antigone dies, then I am completely alone. I have no family left. I have no one left to be with. Interestingly, this seems maybe to have not fully dawned on Ismene early on when she knew that Antigone was going to do what Antigone did. Ismene will finish by saying, yet our fault is one. Antigone says, take courage, thou wilt live. My soul long since had given itself to death, that to the dead I might bring help. Antigone says, I'm ready to die. You're not ready to die. This is dumb. You should have nothing to do with what I've done. I gave you your chance. You didn't take your chance enough. Creon laughingly says about the two women, of these two maidens here, the one I say hath lost her mind, but now the other ever since her life began. We got a couple of crazy women here, Creon says. Ismene says, yes, my lord, my king. No mind that ever lived stands firm in evil days, but still it goes beside itself astray. In other words, Ismene says to Creon, do you blame us? I mean, think about the terrible position that we are in, and especially my sister Antigone is in. Creon says that he will kill her, that he will put her to death. Speak not of your sister. She stands no longer here. She might as well be dead. And then it will be Ismene who asks Creon to ratchet up. Shakespeare learned from Sophocles how to play this game, right? Of ratcheting up the conflict one more step. We watch the play Hamlet, and Hamlet kills Polonius, and we go, oh, no way, just kill the son of Laertes, or the father of Laertes. Now Laertes has got to come back and jack on Hamlet. Notice how we say in that lecture about Hamlet that Shakespeare loves to ratchet up the conflict. Here, Ismene will say, and will you kill your son's betrothed bride? And of course the audience will go, oh, no way. Creon has a boy. His name is Haemon. Haemon and Antigone are a thing. They are betrothed to be married. Creon is, however, lost his mind. He's enraged. And he will say it. Full many a field there is to which he may plow. I'll get him another woman. Ismene says, but none like that prepared for him and her. Creon says, wives that are vile I love not for my son. Now this is interesting because Creon will lose his wife, Eurydice, at the end of this play. She will commit suicide because the very son we're talking about here, Haemon, he will be dead by the end of the play, right? Antigone speaks a most ironic line. She says, oh, dearest Haemon, how thy father shames thee. It's almost as if Antigone has been doing this whole thing with the burial of Polynices and has not considered her fiancé. The guy she's supposed to marry, who, oh yeah, just happens to be the son to the king. Fascinating. Fascinating. It's as if she hasn't considered the implications for her actions. Creon says, thou art too vexing, thou, and these thy words on marriage ever harping. Ismene asks again, wilt thou rob thine own dear son of whom he loved? Creon says, 'tis death who breaks the marriage contract off. Ismene says, her doom is fixed, it seems then, she must die. Creon says, so thou dost think, and I, no more delay, ye slaves. Our women henceforth must be kept as women, suffered not to roam abroad. For even boldest natures shrink in fear when they behold the end of life draw nigh. Whoa. And there it is, an outright statement of the patriarchy. He says it, all men must control their women. Now go back to our comments on Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and more particularly The Wife of Bath's prologue. And we'll talk about the way in which Chaucer brilliantly critiques and attacks in iconoclastic ways this notion. I'm pointing out this is a very, very old notion. It's the job of men to control their women. Think about then the overlays here of this play. For Creon, it's the job of a king to control his subjects. It's the job of men to control their women. And then there's Antigone, who says, well, yeah, but what about the will of the gods? I buried my brother Polynices. But oh yeah, there's also this other thing. I have a guy I'm in love with. Now this has led to all kinds of questions, like not least of which, Antigone never told Haman what she was doing. She never shared with him. And what's Haman going to do when he and Daddy finally come together? Well, the misogyny of Creon is here obvious. But I want to point out, to at least, I'm not going to cut him any slack, because you can't cut slack about the patriarchy. We know that. But let's at least admit, this is a cultural phenomenon of its day that says women are beneath men, Antigone is a woman, and therefore she is suspect right from the start. It is Creon's job to keep this woman in line. No more of these women henceforth. They have to be kept as women, not allowed to roam about. The implication here is even they're not allowed to think for themselves. They're not allowed to have an opinion. Antigone is wrong in that she has an opinion. Wow. The chorus will come on in some darkly ironic lines to talk about how strong humans are. These are, of course, ironic because it depends on what kind of strength you're talking about. It's possible that what Sophocles is doing is he wants to really drive this wedge into the psyche of his audience members. Where do you side with Antigone? Is she strong or is she weak? She's going against the will of the state, and yet she's doing something for her family. It's a powerful conflict. We next will have the second major discussion. This will be Creon with his boy Haman. This is one of the most powerfully and brutal scenes that you will ever see in Greek drama. One of the reasons why I love to teach Greek theater is that I'm able to show to students that the fundamental conflicts and questions of our existence, they're not new. They're very, very old. And when you watch this conflict, it starts out as a conversation and it ends up as an argument between father and son, between Creon and Haman, between the king and the lover of Antigone. When you get to the end of this thing, you know you've been here before, where you've watched, for example, an adult and a young person go at it, and the adult says, I'm right, and the kid says, you're wrong, and the adult says, I'm older than you, you don't have a right to tell me, and the kid says, age has nothing to do with it. Or when you watch someone in power versus someone who's not in power go at it. And ultimately, this gets very personal, and Creon begins to say some things. Do you think it's ever true that a father ever says something or a mother ever says something? We go back to Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Remember in that fatal scene when Juliet's mom comes in and says, hey, I got great news. Your dad's arranged a marriage for you. And Juliet says, are you kidding me? I will marry the killer of our cousin Tybalt, Romeo, before I will marry Paris. And Daddy shows up. Daddy says some things. And in that lecture that I've given and posted on learnstrong.net, you'll maybe remember, I've given that comment there. That do you think it's ever possible that when a parent gets upset, the parent says something that the parent does not mean? We need to think about that as young people, because someday we might ourselves be adults who have to say things in anger. And we got to be careful about what we say. The exchange between Haman and Creon then is powerful. Creon will speak first. Again, I'm spending time with this language because A, I think it's beautiful language, but I think you've got to appreciate the conflict through the language to really understand what's going on. Creon begins with a statement. Soon, his boy walks on stage. Soon we shall know much more than sneers can tell. Surely thou hast not come, my son, to rage against thy father, hearing his decree, fixing her Antigone's doom, who should have been thy bride. Or are we still, whate'er we do, beloved? Creon asks his boy. You're not here to try to convince me that your wife, this Antigone, this woman, deserves to live. Haman's approach, linguistic, rhetorical approach, is fascinating. He doesn't come on stage powerful, emotional. He doesn't come on stage and say to Creon, you're an idiot. He rather comes on stage and says, my father, I'm thine. I support you. Do thou direct with thy wise counsels, I will follow them. In other words, as long as your counsels are good and legit, I'll follow them. No marriage weighs one moment in the scales with me while thou art prospering in thy reign. In other words, Haman says, marriage is not above the state. No. I'm with you. You get a sense that Creon does one of these numbers like, okay, good, good, good. This thought, my son, should dwell within thy breast, that all things stand below a father's will. In Greek society, the Patriarchy, the father has total power, so much so that in the Oresteia, Agamemnon can kill his own daughter. Think about that. Agamemnon can sacrifice Iphigenia because he's the dad. Dads have all the power. Creon reminds son of this. And for this men pray that they may rear and keep obedient offspring by their hearths and homes, that they may both require their father's foes and pay with him like honors to his friend. In other words, every father wants a son who obeys. Every parent wants a child who obeys. Or do we? Is this one of the pivotal moments that we can identify as change within our society? Do parents want children who simply do exactly what they're told? Or rather, do parents want children who can make up their own mind for themselves? This is a very interesting question. I had a parent who once came to me in a parent-teacher conference. My daughter, she's just got a mind of her own. She always is thinking for herself, and she lets us know at home what that opinion is, and she disagrees with me. She tells me that she disagrees with me. It's unbelievable. I don't know what to do. And I said, congratulations on raising an amazing daughter. The mother said, what are you talking about? I said, do you really want to raise a child that does everything she's told? Surely you want a daughter who has her own mind, don't you? Think about what Creon has just said. The most important thing a child can do, a son can do, and by extension a daughter can do, is to obey the father. Right? Reverence. But he who reareth sons that profiteth not, what could one say of him but this, that he breeds his own sorrow, laughter to his foes? Think about even in Oedipus at Colonus, when Polynices comes to Oedipus, Oedipus says to him,